There exists a threshold so subtle that the thinking mind recoils from it. Not because it is false, but because it is too immediate. What you are about to encounter does not unfold gradually. It does not require years of discipline nor devotion to complex systems. It works with such speed that the mind, trained to equate truth with effort, instinctively tries to dismiss it. This rejection is not failure. It is the final defense of an identity that was never in control. You have been taught that power must be earned, that transformation must be slow, that awakening is reserved for saints, sages, or the endlessly disciplined. Yet beneath these beliefs lies a far simpler mechanism, one so direct it feels illegal to acknowledge. This is not manifestation as you were taught. This is not self-improvement. This is not becoming something new. This is remembering the operating system that was active before thought learned to speak. When this state activates, effort collapses. Time reorganizes. Reality responds before intention finishes forming. The ancients called this many names. The mystics whispered it only in silence. Modern language has no word for it, so we call it God mode, not as metaphor but as function. If at any moment your mind says, "This can't be real," you are closer than you think. Do not try to believe what follows. Belief is too slow. Simply notice. Chapter 1. The Speed That Frightens the Mind. There is a moment so brief it often goes unnoticed, a flicker between perception and thought, a gap where something shifts before language can name it. This is where real power operates. You have felt it before, a sudden knowing, a decision made without deliberation, a door opening before you reached for the handle, and just as quickly as it appeared, the mind rushed in to explain it away. Coincidence, luck, imagination. The mind does this not because it is malicious, but because it is slow. The mind was never built for immediacy. It functions through memory, comparison, and prediction. It needs time to reference the past and project into the future. When something happens faster than this process allows, the mind experiences it as a threat. Not because the event is dangerous, but because it bypasses the identity that depends on effort and sequence to exist. Speed reveals authority. When something works instantly, the mind loses its role as mediator. There is no problem to solve, no path to analyze, no strategy to refine. And without these functions, the mind fears erasure. So it does the only thing it can. It rejects. This rejection is subtle. It sounds like reason. That can't be real. Nothing works that fast. If it were true, everyone would know. But beneath these thoughts is a deeper discomfort. If reality can respond immediately, then the stories about struggle, worthiness, and preparation begin to collapse. The mind senses this collapse and moves to protect its position. Throughout history, this speed has been mistaken for chaos, madness, or divine intervention. Those who stumbled into it unintentionally were often labeled unstable or blessed, depending on the culture. But neither interpretation was accurate. What they touched was simply the natural state of consciousness unfiltered by delay. Creation does not hesitate. Hesitation is learned. It is trained into the nervous system through repetition, consequence, and fear. As children, response was immediate. Desire moved directly into action. Attention shifted without resistance. Time was not measured, only inhabited. But as identity formed, speed became dangerous. Acting too quickly led to correction. Speaking too freely led to punishment. Trusting intuition led to embarrassment. So the system adapted. It slowed itself down. What you call patience is often suppression. What you call discipline is often distrust. What you call maturity is often hesitation disguised as wisdom. Yet, beneath all of this, the original operating system remains intact. Reality itself is instantaneous. The delay you experience is not in the universe, but in the interface you use to interact with it. When consciousness is unburdened by self-reference, response is immediate, not rushed, not impulsive, simply precise. This is why the mind fears speed. Speed exposes the lie that control comes from thinking. The truth is quieter and more unsettling. Control comes from alignment, and alignment precedes thought. Consider how your body moves when you stumble. There is no planning, no internal discussion. Balance is restored before the mind even registers danger. This is not instinct in the animal sense. It is intelligence operating without interference. The same intelligence that regulates heartbeat and breath. The same intelligence that coordinates seasons and tides. God mode is not a heightened state layered on top of effort. It is what remains when effort steps aside. The mind believes safety comes from caution, but the universe does not operate on caution. It operates on coherence. When your inner state is unified, response is immediate because there is no internal contradiction to slow it down. Fear introduces delay, doubt fragments command, identity negotiates. When these dissolve, action becomes inevitable. This is why techniques fail when they are approached with urgency. Urgency implies lack. It signals to reality that something is missing. But speed does not emerge from need. It emerges from authority, and authority does not announce itself. It is felt. The moment you stop asking whether something will work, it already has. The mind tries to reject this because it cannot participate in it. It can observe it only after the fact. By the time thought arrives, the shift has already occurred. This leaves the mind feeling obsolete, and obsolescence feels like death to an identity built on narration. But nothing is being destroyed. The mind is not meant to lead, it is meant to report. When it resumes its rightful position, fear subsides. Speed no longer feels reckless, it feels natural. You are not meant to chase immediacy. Chasing implies distance. This speed is already present beneath your hesitation, beneath your analysis, beneath your waiting. The moment you stop bracing for change, it happens. This chapter is not an instruction. It is a recognition. If something in you felt unsettled reading this, that is not confusion. It is proximity. The mind does not fear what is far away. It fears what is close enough to dismantle it. Let that discomfort remain unresolved. Speed will take care of the rest. Chapter 2. The Illusion of Gradual Power. You were taught to believe that power accumulates slowly, that becoming is a process measured in steps, seasons, and years. That truth must be earned through repetition, endurance, and proof. This belief feels reasonable. It is reinforced everywhere. Skills take time. Bodies mature gradually. Civilizations rise in stages. From this pattern, the mind draws a conclusion. Transformation itself must be slow. But this conclusion is false. What grows gradually is familiarity, not power. What unfolds over time is confidence, not capacity. Power does not increase. It is either obscured or revealed. The illusion of gradual power was never about how reality works. It was about how identity stays intact. Identity requires continuity. It needs a past to justify itself and a future to move toward. Sudden change threatens this continuity. If you could shift instantly, the story of who you are would fracture. Roles would dissolve. Excuses would evaporate. The mind would lose its leverage. So gradualism became sacred. Spiritual systems adopted it. Self-help sanctified it. Even enlightenment was framed as a distant summit reached only after long purification. Not because this was true, but because it was tolerable. Slow change allows the ego to adapt. Instant change exposes it. The universe, however, does not operate on tolerance. It operates on coherence. Consider light. It does not brighten the room gradually once the switch is flipped. Darkness exists fully until it does not. The transition appears sudden because the condition changed, not because the light traveled slowly. Consciousness works the same way. You are not becoming powerful. You are removing what obscures power. The belief in gradual power keeps attention focused on effort rather than orientation. It trains you to look forward instead of inward, to wait instead of notice, to practice instead of recognize. This is why so many feel endlessly prepared but never activated. They mistake repetition for readiness. Readiness is not accumulation. It is alignment. And alignment does not take time. It takes honesty. The mind resists this because honesty collapses timelines. It eliminates the comforting narrative of almost there. If power is available now, then the delay was never external. It was never circumstantial. It was never due to missing information. It was chosen, not consciously, but protectively. Gradualism gives the ego a job. It allows the self-image to remain relevant while appearing to evolve. Progress becomes a story instead of a shift. Movement replaces arrival. This is why you can study, practice, and refine endlessly without crossing the threshold. The threshold does not respond to effort. It responds to surrender of pretense. Ancient traditions understood this, though the knowledge was often buried beneath ritual. Sudden awakenings were described as lightning, fire, or remembrance. The language was poetic, but the mechanism was precise. When the internal contradiction ceased, the shift occurred. Not after, not eventually, immediately. The mind protests, but habits take time to change. Yes, habits are behaviors, not identity. They rearrange themselves once authority is reclaimed. You do not defeat habits through struggle. You outgrow them by no longer needing their function. Gradual change is necessary only when resistance remains. Where there is no resistance, there is no process. This is difficult to accept because resistance has been normalized. You have learned to equate friction with legitimacy. Ease feels suspicious. Speed feels irresponsible. But these are emotional reactions, not truths. Power does not announce itself with drama. It moves quietly, efficiently, without commentary. Think of moments when you decided something was over, truly over, not debated, not negotiated, just finished. Notice how fast behavior reorganized afterward. No willpower was required. No timeline was followed. The decision itself collapsed the process. That is power. The illusion of gradual power convinces you that transformation is additive. In reality, it is subtractive. Something false falls away, and what remains was always there. This is why the mind prefers steps. Steps postpone responsibility. They allow you to say, "I'm working on it," instead of "I am choosing it." But reality does not respond to working. It responds to being. When you are aligned, response is immediate because there is nothing to reconcile. When you are divided, response slows because reality mirrors your hesitation. Gradualism is not wrong. It is simply unnecessary once clarity is complete. You do not need to dismantle the illusion aggressively. Aggression is still resistance. All that is required is to notice when you are using time as protection, when not yet feels safer than now. The moment you see this clearly, the spell weakens. This chapter does not ask you to force immediacy. Forcing would only recreate effort in a different form. It asks you to question the loyalty you have given to slowness. Ask yourself quietly, if nothing needed to be proven, what would change instantly? Do not answer with thought. Let the question dissolve the timeline. Power does not arrive. It reveals itself the moment you stop pretending it must be built. Chapter 3. The Observer That Was Never Offline. Before any thought arises, something is already present. Before intention forms, before memory stirs, before language claims experience as its own, there is awareness. This awareness does not arrive, it does not activate, it does not turn on and off, it has never been offline, yet you were taught to overlook it. From an early age, attention was trained outward. You learned to identify with what you were thinking, feeling, and doing. The subtle sense of being, the quiet fact of awareness itself, was ignored because it produced no immediate reward. It could not be praised, measured, or corrected. So it faded into the background, not because it disappeared, but because nothing pointed to it. The observer became invisible by being constant. And what is constant is often mistaken for absence. Right now, as you read these words, something is aware of them. That awareness is not the words themselves. It is not the voice in your head interpreting them. It is the space in which both appear. This space does not strain, it does not evaluate, it does not interfere. It simply knows this is the observer that was never offline. You have assumed awareness is something you do. In truth, it is what you are. Everything else, thought, emotion, sensation, moves through it like weather across the sky. The sky does not chase the clouds. It does not resist storms. It remains unchanged by their passing. The mind resists this recognition because it destabilizes hierarchy. If awareness precedes thought, then thought cannot be in control. If observation exists before identity, then identity becomes a function, not a ruler. This feels threatening to a system built on self-definition. But notice something subtle. You can observe a thought. You can notice an emotion. You can feel a sensation arise and pass. This means you are not those things. You are the awareness in which they occur. This is not philosophy. It is direct experience. Yet most never pause long enough to see it. They try to change thoughts instead of noticing what is noticing the thoughts. They attempt to manage emotions instead of recognizing the space that contains them. They chase altered states while overlooking the constant state beneath all states. The observer does not need improvement. It does not evolve. It does not heal. It does not require protection. It is already whole. This is why activation feels strange. There is nothing to add, no upgrade to install, no hidden switch to flip. What changes is not awareness, but identification. Attention stops clinging to the contents of experience and returns to the context itself. And when this happens, something profound shifts. Action arises without anxiety, choice occurs without doubt, response precedes reaction. This is what ancient teachings tried to point toward with words like witness, presence, or being. But words inevitably fail because the observer cannot be turned into an object. The moment you try to grasp it, you are already using it. It is closer than breath, more intimate than thought, more obvious than sight, and yet the mind keeps searching elsewhere. Why? Because the observer offers no drama. It does not validate the story of struggle. It does not confirm the narrative of becoming. It does not promise future reward. It simply is. And in that simplicity, the entire architecture of effort collapses. God mode does not emerge when the observer is created. It emerges when the observer is recognized as primary. When awareness stops identifying with the fluctuations passing through it, authority returns naturally. Not authority over others, authority over response, authority over orientation. This is why so much changes without effort when this recognition stabilizes. You are no longer negotiating with thought. You are no longer reacting from memory. You are no longer defending an identity built from accumulation. You are watching. And from watching, clarity arises. The observer does not interfere, yet its presence reorganizes everything. Like a light switched on in a dark room, it does not move the furniture, but it reveals what was always there. The obstacles you believed were solid dissolve when seen clearly. The urgency you carried loosens when no longer believed. This is not detachment in the sense of withdrawal. It is intimacy without entanglement. You feel fully, act decisively, and engage completely, without being consumed by the experience. The mind fears this because it equates observation with passivity. But observation is not passive. It is precise. It allows action to emerge from clarity rather than compulsion. This chapter does not ask you to meditate longer, think differently, or analyze awareness. It asks you to notice what has been present through every experience you have ever had. The observer that watched your childhood memories. The observer that noticed confusion, certainty, fear, and joy. The observer that is aware of these words now. It has never left. It has never slept. It has never needed activation. The only shift required is allegiance. When awareness is recognized as home, everything else becomes movement, and movement, when no longer mistaken for identity, becomes effortless. Chapter 4. Why effort cancels authority. Effort feels virtuous. It feels responsible. It feels like proof that you care. From childhood, effort was rewarded. Try harder. Push through. Don't quit. The message was clear. Value comes from strain. Achievement must cost something. Ease is suspicious. Flow is accidental. Authority belongs to those who work for it. But this conditioning hides a deeper truth. Effort is not power. Effort is compensation. You exert effort only when you doubt alignment. You push only when you believe resistance is required. Effort is the body's response to perceived separation from outcome. It is the signal that says, I am not already positioned where response can occur naturally. Authority does not push. Authority assumes coherence. When a command comes from authority, there is no tension behind it, no justification, no rehearsal, no internal debate. The command does not negotiate with circumstances, it simply moves through them. This is why effort cancels authority. The moment you strain, you announce uncertainty. You tell reality, I do not trust that alignment is sufficient. And reality mirrors that message with delay, friction, and complication. The universe is exquisitely literal. It responds not to what you want, but to what you demonstrate. Effort demonstrates doubt disguised as diligence. It broadcasts the belief that force is required because flow cannot be trusted. This belief did not originate with you. It was learned, passed down through systems that required obedience, productivity, and compliance. In such systems, authority was external. Power belonged elsewhere. Effort became the bridge between the self and permission. But consciousness does not require permission. When effort is released, something unsettling happens. The familiar sense of control dissolves. The identity that relied on striving feels exposed. Without effort, who are you? Without struggle, what justifies your story? This is why people return to effort even when it exhausts them. Effort gives the ego a role. It provides narrative momentum. It creates the illusion of movement even when alignment is absent. Authority, by contrast, is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not over-explain. It does not hurry. When authority is present, action feels inevitable rather than forced. Decisions land without resistance. Timing aligns without micromanagement. Results appear without theatrics. Think of moments when you spoke with absolute clarity. Not louder, not longer, simply certain. Notice how others responded. No persuasion was needed. No effort was applied. The authority was felt, not asserted. This is the difference between pushing and positioning. Effort pushes reality, authority positions you within it. The paradox is that releasing effort does not mean inaction. It means action without internal friction, movement without self-conflict, doing without the weight of proving. Effort arises from the belief that something must be overcome. Authority arises from the recognition that nothing is opposing you except misalignment. This is why so many spiritual techniques fail. They are practiced with effort. They are used to get something rather than to return to something. The practitioner strains toward a future state instead of noticing the present coherence already available. Effort creates time. Authority collapses it. When effort is present, the mind measures progress. It asks how long, how much, and how far. Authority does not measure. It moves. This does not mean effort is wrong. It means effort is a signal. When effort appears, it is showing you where trust has not yet been restored. It is pointing to a belief that reality must be managed rather than met. The body knows this instinctively. Notice how tension increases when you force an outcome. Notice how breath shortens, jaw tightens, shoulders rise. The nervous system is preparing for conflict because the mind has declared one. Authority feels different. The body softens, breath deepens, attention widens. There is readiness without strain. This state is not achieved through discipline. It is remembered through honesty. Ask yourself, what am I trying to make happen right now? Then ask, what would change if I trusted alignment instead? Do not answer with thought. Feel the shift in the body. Feel how effort loosens when the need to control dissolves. This sensation is not weakness, it is precision. God mode does not activate through force. It activates through release. Through the quiet confidence that reality does not need to be coerced to cooperate. When effort falls away, authority returns to its rightful place, not as dominance but as resonance, not as control but as clarity. You do not need to try less. You need to stop trying to compensate for imagined separation. When you stand where alignment already exists, effort becomes unnecessary, and what remains moves with unmistakable power. Chapter 5. The moment before intention. There is a place where intention has not yet formed, a narrow threshold before desire becomes a request, before thought claims ownership of movement. This place is quiet, unmarked, and rarely noticed, yet it is where reality listens most closely. Most people believe intention is the starting point of creation. They focus on what they want, clarify it, repeat it, visualize it, and push it forward with effort. But intention is already late. By the time it appears, something deeper has already decided. Reality responds before intention finishes forming. You can sense this if you pay attention to the micro-moment just before you decide to act. There is a subtle readiness, a silent leaning, a felt coherence that does not yet have a name. This is not motivation. It is alignment without language. The mind rushes to claim this moment. It labels it as choice, will, or desire. But the labeling happens after the shift. Intention is the echo, not the origin. This is why so much effort fails. It is applied at the wrong layer. When you try to shape reality through intention alone, you are steering from the surface. You are working with outcomes instead of orientation. You are pushing ripples instead of adjusting the current beneath them. The moment before intention is where the current is set. Here there is no asking, no planning, no emotional charge. There is simply a sense of inevitability, a quiet knowing that movement will occur not because you demand it, but because resistance is absent. This moment feels neutral to the mind, which is why it is overlooked. It lacks drama. There is no urgency, no excitement, no fear. And because the mind associates power with intensity, it dismisses neutrality as empty. But neutrality is not emptiness. It is coherence. In this space, identity loosens. You are not trying to become someone. You are not defending a position. You are not negotiating with possibility. You are simply present, and presence is already aligned. This is where God mode actually operates. Not in the command itself, but in the silence that precedes it. Think of moments when things just happened without effort. You met the right person without searching. You said the exact words needed without rehearsal. You moved at the perfect time without planning. These moments did not arise from intention. They arose from being in the correct orientation when intention became unnecessary. The mind tries to recreate these moments by copying the result. It chases certainty, confidence, or clarity. But these are expressions, not causes. The cause was alignment before thought interfered. This is why the mind resists this chapter. There is nothing to do here, no technique to practice, no affirmation to repeat. The instruction is not active, it is subtractive. You are being asked to notice what remains when you do not rush to define the next step. When you pause just long enough to feel the moment before intention, something recalibrates. The body softens, the breath deepens, attention widens, and from this state, action emerges cleanly. Not impulsive, not hesitant. Precise. This precision does not feel heroic. It feels obvious. The mind prefers intention because it feels like agency. But true agency does not announce itself. It does not need reinforcement. It operates from alignment, not assertion. The universe does not respond to forceful intention. It responds to internal consistency. When your internal state is unified, intention becomes redundant. Reality adjusts automatically because there is no conflicting signal to delay response. This is why trying harder often produces less. Effort introduces contradiction. It splits attention between wanting and lacking. It signals to reality that alignment is incomplete. The moment before intention contains no lack. It is full, self-contained, and unopposed. You cannot hold this moment through will. The moment you try, you are already past it. But you can recognize it, and recognition is enough. Begin to notice the space just before you speak, just before you move, just before you decide. Not to control it, only to feel it. In that space, there is no story about who you are or what should happen. There is only readiness. And readiness is the language reality understands. This chapter does not ask you to stop intending. Intention will continue to arise naturally. It asks you to stop believing intention is the source and the source is quieter, earlier, closer. When you learn to rest in the moment before intention, creation becomes effortless because nothing is being imposed. Reality moves because you are no longer in its way. And when action comes from this place, it carries an unmistakable authority, one that does not strain, does not rush, and does not doubt. It simply unfolds. This is the speed the mind cannot manage, and the power it cannot imitate. Chapter 6. Identity as a Delay Mechanism. Identity feels solid. It feels personal. It feels like you. But identity is not who you are. It is a timing device. From the moment you learned to say, I am, a structure began to form around experience. Preferences were named, memories were claimed, roles were assigned. Slowly, a story emerged, a continuous thread meant to make sense of change by organizing it into sequence. Identity's function is continuity. It links yesterday to today and today to tomorrow. It explains why things take time. It justifies why some outcomes feel distant. It gives reasons for delay that feel logical, even comforting. Without identity, events would not need explanation. They would simply occur. This is why identity acts as a delay mechanism. Not maliciously, not intentionally, but structurally. Identity depends on time, and time depends on identity. The moment you define yourself as someone who is becoming, you introduce duration. The moment you see yourself as someone who used to be or is trying to be, you step into a timeline. And once you are in a timeline, immediacy feels impossible. Identity says, I am on my way. Authority says, I am here. Identity measures progress. Authority measures alignment. This is why so much spiritual work reinforces identity instead of dissolving it. The seeker identity replaces the old identity, but the structure remains intact. There is still a self who is improving, healing, awakening. There is still a path, a future version, a not yet. And as long as not yet exists, response slows. Reality does not oppose identity, it simply mirrors it. If you see yourself as unfinished, reality reflects process. If you see yourself as preparing, reality responds with waiting. This is not punishment, it is precision. The universe does not respond to who you wish to be, it responds to who you are being. Identity creates a buffer between awareness and action. It filters response through memory and expectation. It asks, is this consistent with who I think I am? If not, it hesitates. It negotiates. It delays. This is why sudden change feels disorienting. Identity scrambles to catch up. The familiar reference points dissolve. The story loses coherence. And without coherence, the mind feels unsafe. So identity reinstates itself quickly and it says that was a fluke, that was luck. That won't last. These thoughts are not skepticism, they are stabilization mechanisms. Identity is trying to reassert timeline control. But notice something important. Identity is never present in the moment of action. It arrives afterward. When you laugh spontaneously, identity is absent. When you respond instinctively, identity is absent. When clarity strikes without warning, identity is absent. It shows up later to narrate what happened. Identity is a commentator, not a commander. Yet it has been promoted to authority. This promotion creates delay because commentators analyze. They do not move. They reflect, evaluate, and contextualize. All useful functions, except when mistaken for leadership. When identity leads, life becomes procedural. You plan, you prepare, you wait for confirmation. But when awareness leads, movement is immediate because there is no internal debate about consistency. Awareness does not need to protect a self-image. It does not need to maintain a story. It simply responds. This is why God mode feels impersonal at first. Not cold, but neutral. There is no dramatic sense of me doing something extraordinary. There is just movement happening cleanly. The ego interprets this as loss, but nothing essential is lost. Personality remains, preferences remain, memory remains. What dissolves is the insistence that these elements must govern timing. Identity wants credit. Authority wants coherence. Identity wants recognition. Authority wants alignment. When identity is relaxed, not destroyed, timing accelerates naturally. You stop checking whether you are allowed to move. You stop asking whether you are ready. You stop referencing the past to determine the future. This does not mean recklessness. It means relevance. Action arises in response to what is, not what was or what might be. The delay you experience in manifestation is rarely about belief. It is about self-definition. You are trying to receive something that does not fit the identity you are still defending, so reality waits. Not because it withholds, but because it respects coherence. If you identify as someone who struggles, ease will feel foreign. If you identify as someone who heals slowly, sudden wholeness will feel unsafe. If you identify as someone who is learning power, power will stay instructional rather than operational. Reality does not violate identity, it reinforces it. This is why affirmations often feel hollow. They attempt to graft new outcomes onto an old identity. The contradiction creates friction, and friction creates delay. The solution is not to attack identity. Attack implies effort, and effort reinforces the very structure you are trying to transcend. The solution is to see identity clearly. Notice how often you reference yourself. Notice how often you describe who you are. Notice how often you explain why something is not happening yet. These explanations feel reasonable. They are also unnecessary. You do not need a better identity. You need less allegiance to it. As awareness becomes primary, identity becomes optional. It functions when needed and dissolves when not. It stops insisting on continuity. And when continuity is no longer required, immediacy returns. This chapter is not asking you to abandon your life or forget your story. It is asking you to stop using your story as a timing mechanism. You are not late. You are not early. You are not becoming. You are present. And presence does not delay response. The moment identity loosens its grip on time, reality no longer waits for permission. It moves, and it moves now. Chapter 7. The Silent Command Field. There is a form of command that does not speak. It does not issue orders. It does not persuade, demand, or insist. Yet everything responds to it. This command is not transmitted through language or intention. It moves beneath both, like gravity beneath motion. It is not something you generate. It is something you inhabit. This is the silent command field. You have encountered it in others. A person enters a room and conversation shifts. Not because they dominate, but because something settles. Decisions feel clearer around them. Conflict softens. Attention reorganizes. Nothing overt is done, yet everything adjusts. This is not charisma. It is not confidence. It is not authority performed. It is coherence embodied. The silent command field emerges when there is no internal argument. When thought, emotion, body, and awareness are not pulling in different directions. When nothing inside is trying to prove, protect, or postpone. In this state, reality does not need to be told what to do. It recognizes alignment and responds automatically. Most people attempt to command reality through assertion. They speak affirmations loudly. They visualize intensely. They repeat intentions with emotional force. But force is noise, and noise interferes with signal. The universe does not respond to volume. It responds to clarity. Clarity does not shout. It resonates. The silent command field is not created by effort. It is revealed when effort ends. When the internal environment becomes so still, so unified, that no countersignal remains. Countersignals are subtle. They appear as hesitation, self-monitoring, doubt disguised as realism, hope tinged with fear. These signals cancel command. They introduce ambiguity. Reality mirrors ambiguity with delay. This is why silence is so powerful. Not silence of sound, but silence of contradiction. When you want something and also doubt it, the field fractures. When you desire change and also fear its consequences, the command weakens. When you intend alignment but still identify with struggle, the signal becomes incoherent. The silent command field requires no emotional charge. It does not need excitement. In fact, excitement often destabilizes it by introducing anticipation. Anticipation implies absence. Absence introduces time. Command exists only in now. Consider how your body moves when you touch something hot. There is no discussion, no planning, no affirmation. Withdrawal happens instantly. The command did not come from thought. It came from coherence between sensation and response. The silent command field operates the same way, but at the level of reality. When alignment is complete, response is reflexive. This is why the mind resists silence. Silence removes the mind's role as interpreter. Without commentary, the mind cannot insert delay. It cannot negotiate outcome. It cannot claim authorship. Silence reveals what has always been in charge. Many spiritual traditions misunderstood this field and wrapped it in ritual. They believed silence had to be achieved through effort, discipline, or withdrawal. But silence is not an achievement. It is what remains when unnecessary movement stops. You do not enter the silent command field. You stop exiting it. Every time you overthink, you step out. Every time you justify, you step out. Every time you check whether something is working, you step out. These actions seem harmless. They are not mistakes. But they introduce feedback loops. Feedback loops slow response because they fragment authority. Authority does not monitor itself. When you act from the silent command field, there is no internal surveillance. No part of you is watching to see if it succeeds. There is simply action arising and reality adjusting. This is why those who operate from this field often appear detached from outcomes, not because they do not care, but because caring has shifted from attachment to alignment. Attachment says, I need this to happen. Alignment says, this is already coherent. The universe responds to the latter instantly because there is nothing to resolve. The silent command field is not mystical, it is mechanical. It follows precise principles. Remove contradiction, and command emerges. Remove self-reference, and timing collapses. This field cannot be faked. It cannot be simulated through posture, tone, or belief. It is felt, not projected. Others sense it because coherence is contagious. Nervous systems entrain, environments reorganize. You do not need to broadcast the field. You need to stop interfering with it. Notice how often you interrupt alignment with commentary, how quickly you explain what you are doing, how often you seek reassurance. These habits keep the field noisy. This chapter is not asking you to be silent outwardly. It is asking you to notice the internal chatter that competes with command. Ask yourself, what am I adding that is unnecessary? What am I saying internally that contradicts what I want to move? Then do nothing about it. Just notice. Notice how the field stabilizes when you stop correcting it. Notice how presence thickens when explanation dissolves. Notice how action feels heavier when you narrate it and lighter when you do not. The silent command field does not need you to believe in it. Belief is still a thought. It only needs you to stop diluting it. When coherence is complete, the field speaks for itself. Reality listens and responds without delay. Chapter 8. Thought is always late. Thought arrives after the event and claims it was there all along. It narrates, interprets, explains. It says, I decided, I chose, I made this happen, but thought is always late. This is not an insult to thinking. Thought is a remarkable instrument. It organizes memory, builds language, and allows complex systems to function. But it is not the origin of movement. It is the record keeper, not the source. Action precedes explanation. Response precedes reasoning. Alignment precedes intention. If you observe closely, you will notice that decisions are made before thought announces them. The body moves, words are spoken, attention shifts. And only afterward does thought step in to describe what just occurred. This delay is subtle, but it is constant. Thought needs time because it depends on reference. It compares the present to the past, measures it against expectation, and projects it into a future. This process is useful for analysis, but it is incompatible with immediacy. Reality does not wait for analysis. When you rely on thought to lead, you are always a moment behind. You are steering by looking in the rearview mirror, assuming the road ahead will resemble what has already passed. This creates caution, hesitation, and delay, not because thought is wrong, but because it is mispositioned. Thought is an echo. It echoes alignment or contradiction, clarity or confusion. It does not generate them. This is why thinking your way into power feels exhausting. You are asking the slowest system to perform the fastest function. You are expecting explanation to create coherence instead of recognizing coherence and letting explanation follow. The mind resists this understanding because it threatens authorship. If thought is not the source, then the familiar sense of me as controller begins to dissolve. Responsibility shifts from narration to presence. This feels disorienting at first. You may notice moments where action happens without inner dialogue. A sentence comes out perfectly formed. A movement occurs at exactly the right time. You take a turn you hadn't planned and arrive where you needed to be. Thought rushes in afterward, startled, trying to catch up. Why did I do that? That was lucky. I don't know where that came from. These questions are attempts to reclaim ownership. Thought wants to reinsert itself as cause, but the cause has already passed. The truth is simpler. You were aligned, and alignment moved. When alignment is present, thought becomes unnecessary for initiation. It remains available for reflection, learning, and communication, but it no longer delays action. This is why overthinking feels like paralysis. You are asking thought to decide something that has already been decided at a deeper level. The delay creates internal friction. Conflicting signals emerge, movement stalls. Thought interprets this stall as complexity. In reality, it is misalignment between leadership and function. God mode does not silence thought, it demotes it. Thought returns to its proper role as translator rather than commander. This demotion feels like relief when allowed. The pressure to figure everything out dissolves. Decisions feel cleaner. Timing sharpens. You stop second-guessing because there is nothing to second-guess. Action has already happened. This does not mean impulsivity. Impulse is reactive. Alignment is responsive. Impulse arises from unresolved tension. Alignment arises from coherence. Thought confuses the two because it arrives after both. To the mind, fast action looks reckless. It lacks the familiar markers of caution. But what the mind cannot see is the depth at which the decision occurred. It cannot measure coherence, so it defaults to time as a proxy for safety. If I think longer, it must be safer. This is not true. Safety comes from unity, not duration. When inner signals agree, response is immediate because there is nothing to resolve. When signals conflict, time stretches because resolution is required. Thought notices the stretching and assumes it is necessary. It does not realize it is observing the consequence of its own interference. This is why presence feels powerful. Presence removes the gap between perception and response. It collapses the delay thought introduces, not by force, but by bypass. In presence, awareness moves directly into action. Thought follows behind, describing what happened. This reversal is what makes life feel fluid. You are not meant to eliminate thought. You are meant to stop waiting for it. Stop asking thought for permission to move. Notice how often you delay action until you feel sure. That certainty rarely comes from thought. It comes from the body, from intuition, from the silent command field you have already touched. Thought arrives afterward and says, "Yes, that makes sense now. Let it." You do not need thought to approve reality in advance. Reality does not consult commentary before responding. The universe moves at the speed of alignment, not cognition. This chapter is not a call to abandon reasoning. It is a call to recognize timing. Use thought when it is useful. Release it when it is obstructive. Let awareness lead. Let thought report. You will notice something unexpected when you do this. Thought becomes clearer, more precise, less anxious. Freed from leadership, it stops overcompensating. It becomes an ally instead of a bottleneck. And the fear that once accompanied fast action dissolves. Speed no longer feels dangerous because it is no longer blind. It is informed by coherence rather than analysis. The mind fears being late because it believes lateness equals irrelevance. But thought is not made irrelevant by this shift. It is made accurate. It tells the truth about what already is. Thought is always late, but that is exactly why it can be trusted once it stops pretending to lead. When you stop mistaking the echo for the voice, movement regains its natural rhythm. Immediate, precise, unburdened, and reality, finally undelayed, responds in kind. Chapter 9. The Collapse of Time in Presence. Time feels solid because you are taught to stand inside it. You learn to measure yourself against it. You learn to wait for it, race it, fear it, and run out of it. But time is not a force, it is an effect. Time does not move reality forward. Reality moves, and time is the shadow it casts when movement is divided. When presence is fractured, split between memory and anticipation, time stretches. Seconds feel heavy, outcomes feel distant, progress feels slow. But when presence is whole, time compresses until it nearly disappears. This is not metaphor, it is mechanics. You have experienced this collapse before. In moments of complete absorption, deep focus, intimacy, danger, creativity, time loses structure. Hours vanish. Action flows without reference. When the moment ends, you are surprised by how much occurred. What disappeared was not time. What disappeared was division. Presence collapses time because it removes internal negotiation. There is no self checking the clock, no mind comparing now to later, no identity tracking progress. There is only what is happening. And what is happening does not require duration to exist. The universe does not experience time the way the mind does. Time is a coordination tool for sequential awareness, not a fundamental property of reality. When awareness stops sequencing itself, time loses relevance. This is why presence feels powerful. Power does not come from controlling time. It comes from exiting the need for it. When you are fully present, you are no longer waiting for permission from the future. You are no longer constrained by the past. Action arises without delay because nothing inside you is asking, "Is this allowed yet?" This is why manifestation accelerates in presence. Not because you are trying harder, but because you have stopped fragmenting attention. Fragmentation creates intervals. Intervals create delay. Delay creates the illusion of time as obstacle. Presence removes the intervals. In presence, there is no gap between perception and response. The body moves when movement is needed. Words arise when speech is required. Decisions land without rehearsal. The mind notices afterward and says, "That was fast." But fast compared to what? Fast compared to hesitation, fast compared to negotiation, fast compared to identity asking for reassurance. The collapse of time is not dramatic. It is subtle and almost disappointing to the part of you that expects fireworks. There is no sensation of bending reality, no surge of energy, just a quiet efficiency. Things happen when they need to. This quietness is what makes presence easy to dismiss. The mind expects power to feel intense. It expects acceleration to feel forceful. But presence feels normal. Too normal. And because it lacks spectacle, it is often overlooked. Yet nothing alters timing more decisively. When you stop referencing the future stops postponing itself. When you stop reviewing the present stops carrying its weight. Reality reorganizes itself around what is available now. This does not mean you stop planning or remembering. It means planning and remembering stop leading. They become tools rather than governors. Presence is not about focusing harder. Focus is still effort. Presence is about removing the need to be elsewhere. The moment you stop mentally relocating yourself, time collapses. You can feel this right now. Notice where your attention is. Is it anticipating the next sentence, reviewing the previous one, measuring whether this chapter is useful? These movements seem harmless. They are also how time is constructed. Each mental shift creates a before and after. Each comparison creates duration. Now notice what happens when you simply stay with what is being read, not analyzing, not anticipating, just present. The sense of time loosens. This is the mechanism. Presence does not fight time. It makes time unnecessary. The mind fears this because time is one of identity's main supports. Identity needs duration to justify itself. It needs a past to explain why things are the way they are, and a future to promise change. Presence threatens this structure. In presence, identity loses leverage. There is no timeline to manage, no story to advance, just immediate participation. This is why the ego labels presence as impractical. You can't live like that, it says. But you already do in moments. You just don't stay. And you don't need to stay permanently. God mode is not about living in eternal stillness. It is about accessing presence at will and allowing action to arise from there. When action arises from presence, timing becomes precise rather than delayed. Opportunities appear out of nowhere because you are no longer filtering perception through expectation. You see what is available because you are actually here. This is why urgency dissolves in presence. Urgency depends on future orientation. It says, something must happen soon or else. Presence says nothing. And in that silence, movement occurs naturally. The collapse of time does not mean everything happens at once. It means everything happens when it should, without resistance. This is the difference between patience and presence. Patience waits. Presence participates. Waiting reinforces time. Participation dissolves it. This chapter is not asking you to abandon clocks or schedules. It is asking you to notice how often you mentally leave the moment and then blame time for the delay. Time is not delaying you. You are fragmenting presence. When you stop fragmenting, response accelerates not because time speeds up, but because it is no longer being referenced. The universe does not need time to respond. It only needs availability. Presence makes you available. And when availability is complete, time quietly steps aside. What remains moves freely, now. Always now. Chapter 10. God mode is not a state you enter. The mind imagines God mode as a destination, a peak to be reached, a switch to be flipped after enough preparation. This misunderstanding is subtle, but it changes everything. If God mode were a state you entered, it would require movement from where you are to somewhere else. It would imply absence now and presence later. It would belong to time, effort, and progression. But God mode does not belong to time. It is not something you step into. It is something you stop stepping out of. You have been taught to think in terms of states because states are manageable. They have beginnings and endings. They can be practiced, lost, regained. States give the ego a role as gatekeeper. But God mode is not a state. It is the baseline. What you call normal is the modified condition, filtered, slowed, negotiated. The sense of being small, separate, or delayed is not your natural setting. It is the result of constant interference. God mode is what remains when interference ends. This is why seeking it feels frustrating. You are searching for what is already operating underneath the search. Each attempt to reach it pushes you one step further away, not because effort is wrong, but because effort assumes distance. Distance is the illusion. The moment you stop trying to enter God mode, you begin to recognize it. Recognition does not feel like elevation. It feels like release. A quiet dropping of tension you did not realize you were holding. A sense that nothing needs to be added, fixed, or improved before movement can occur. This is deeply unsettling to the identity. Identity survives by managing transitions. It wants thresholds, rituals, and proof. It wants to know when something starts and how long it lasts. God mode offers none of this. It offers continuity without narrative. When God mode is recognized, nothing dramatic happens. There is no surge of power, no cosmic confirmation, no internal announcement. Things simply work. Decisions become simpler because fewer internal voices are competing. Timing sharpens because hesitation is no longer mistaken for wisdom. Reality responds with less resistance because the signal you are emitting is no longer contradictory. This simplicity is why many miss it. They expect transcendence. They receive normalcy. But this normalcy is different. It is not dull. It is efficient, clean, quietly authoritative. Life feels less like a puzzle and more like a conversation that finally lost its static. You stop asking, how do I activate this? And start noticing, why was I deactivating it? The answer is almost always the same. Self-interference. Interference takes many forms: overthinking, self-monitoring, emotional bracing, waiting for certainty, seeking validation. All of these feel responsible. They are also the mechanisms that dim coherence. God mode does not require confidence. Confidence is still a state. It requires alignment. Alignment is the absence of contradiction. When nothing inside you is arguing, reality listens clearly. This is why God mode cannot be sustained through will. Will implies effort, and effort implies resistance. The moment you try to hold God mode, you introduce the very tension that collapses it. But you do not need to hold it. You need to stop gripping. Imagine clenching your fist tightly all day. Muscles strain, circulation slows. Eventually, pain sets in. When you finally open your hand, relief arrives instantly. Not because something was added, but because something unnecessary was released. God mode is the open hand. The mind fears this openness because it equates grip with control. But control is not the same as command. Control manipulates. Command aligns. Manipulation requires constant input. Alignment requires none. This is why God mode feels stable rather than intense. Intensity fluctuates, stability remains. When alignment is present, you do not feel powerful, you feel clear. Clarity does not rush. Clarity does not force. Clarity does not explain itself, it moves. This chapter is not an instruction to stay in God mode. Staying implies effort. It is an invitation to notice how often you leave it and why. Every time you check whether you are doing it right, you step out. Every time you seek reassurance, you step out. Every time you demand proof, you step out. These actions are not mistakes, they are habits, and habits dissolve when seen clearly. God mode is not fragile. It does not disappear because you questioned it. It simply recedes when you insist on managing it. The moment you stop managing, it returns. This is why the fastest way to recognize God mode is not through intensity, but through relaxation. Not relaxation of the body alone, but relaxation of the need to oversee. Let awareness do what it already knows how to do. You do not need to become more present. Presence is already here. You need to stop leaving it in search of improvement. You do not need to feel powerful. Power is operational, not emotional. It is measured by response, not sensation. You do not need to convince yourself of anything. Conviction is unnecessary when coherence is complete. God mode is not an altered state layered on top of life. It is life without distortion. When you stop trying to enter it, you notice you were never outside. And when this recognition stabilizes, something subtle but irreversible occurs. You stop seeking permission to act. You stop waiting for readiness. You stop explaining your movement to yourself. Action arises when it needs to. Silence speaks when words are unnecessary. Reality responds without delay. Not because you are forcing it, but because you are finally not in the way. This is not ascension. This is return. And nothing about it is extraordinary, except how long it was overlooked. Chapter 11. The nervous system as the gatekeeper. Power does not fail because you lack awareness. It fails because the body does not feel safe enough to allow it. This is the part most teachings overlook. You can understand every concept in this book and still experience delay. You can recognize presence, release effort, loosen identity, and yet something subtle keeps the threshold half closed. That something is not belief. It is not discipline. It is not clarity. It is the nervous system. The nervous system is the gatekeeper of immediacy. It decides how much reality you are allowed to experience at once, not consciously, not morally, biologically. If the body senses threat, power is throttled. This makes sense when you understand its role. The nervous system evolved to ensure survival, not transcendence. Its primary function is regulation. It asks a single question, endlessly and without language. Is it safe? If the answer is no, response slows, attention narrows, options collapse, creativity dims, authority recedes. The system moves into protection, and protection looks like hesitation. Most people interpret this hesitation as lack of confidence, lack of faith, or lack of readiness. They try to override it with positive thinking or force. But the body cannot be argued with. It does not respond to logic. It responds to signal. Signal comes from sensation. When God mode begins to activate, the nervous system may react as if something is wrong. Not because power is dangerous, but because unfamiliar freedom feels like loss of control. Control, even painful control, feels safer than the unknown. So the body applies brakes. These brakes feel like anxiety, doubt, overthinking, sudden fatigue, a pull toward distraction. They are not signs of failure. They are signs that capacity is being tested. The nervous system is asking, can you stay present without collapse? If the answer is unclear, it slows the process. This is why awakening can feel destabilizing if it is not integrated through the body. Awareness expands faster than the nervous system can regulate. The result is not liberation, but overwhelm. True power does not override the body. It recruits it. God mode is not allowed through the gates of tension. It enters through regulation. This is why ease is not optional. It is functional. When the body is regulated, coherence increases automatically. Breath deepens. Muscles soften. Sensory awareness expands. In this state, presence feels natural rather than forced. The mind often resists this softness. It equates relaxation with vulnerability. But vulnerability is not the absence of strength. It is the absence of armor. Armor delays response. When the nervous system is armored, it keeps power at a distance. It says, "Not yet. Too much. Slow down." This is not sabotage, it is intelligence. The mistake is trying to bypass it. You do not activate God mode by convincing the mind. You activate it by reassuring the body. Reassurance does not come from words. It comes from sensation, from stillness, from rhythm, from familiarity, from grounding. This is why simple practices, breathing, walking, feeling the weight of the body, are more effective than complex techniques. They speak the nervous system's language. The nervous system does not care about philosophy. It cares about safety. When safety is established, power flows. Notice moments when you feel completely at ease, not excited, not distracted, just steady. In those moments, decisions feel simple. Creativity emerges without pressure. Timing sharpens. You do not feel powerful, you feel normal. That is the clue. God mode does not feel elevated to the nervous system, it feels regulated. This is why many reject it unconsciously. They associate power with intensity. Intensity triggers survival responses. The body tightens, the gate closes. But power, in its true form, is calm. The most decisive actions arise from the most settled states. The clearest commands come from the quietest systems. This is true in nature, in leadership, in combat, in art. Stillness is not passivity. Stillness is readiness without fear. The nervous system allows immediacy only when it trusts that you can handle what arrives. Handle does not mean control. It means remain present without fragmentation. This is why presence must be embodied, not conceptual. If awareness stays in the head while the body remains braced, power splits. The mind may recognize truth, but the body will not permit it to operationalize. Integration is the missing step. Integration happens when you let the body catch up to awareness. When you allow sensation to lead instead of thought. When you slow down enough for regulation to occur, not as delay, but as permission. This is counterintuitive. You want speed, so you slow down. You want immediacy, so you soften. You want authority, so you release tension. But this is how gates open. The nervous system does not open to force, it opens to trust. Trust is built through consistency, through showing the body that presence is not a threat, that silence is not danger, that freedom does not mean collapse. Each time you remain present during uncertainty without bracing, the system learns. Each time you allow sensation without naming it as a problem, regulation deepens. Eventually the question, "Is it safe?" is answered automatically. Yes. And when the answer is yes, the gates open fully. Immediacy becomes normal. Alignment becomes default. Reality responds without resistance. Not because you demanded it, because your entire system agreed. This chapter is not asking you to fix your nervous system, it is asking you to respect it, to stop treating it as an obstacle and recognize it as the final ally. God mode does not override the body. It arrives when the body finally feels safe enough to let you remember who you are. And when that happens, nothing holds you back, because nothing inside you needs to. Chapter 12. The fear of being responsible for reality. There is a fear deeper than failure, deeper than rejection, deeper even than death as the mind imagines it. It is the fear of being responsible, not responsible in the moral sense, responsible in the creative sense. The fear that if reality truly responds to you, then there is nowhere left to hide. Most people believe they want power. What they actually want is permission. Permission to succeed without blame, to receive without consequence, to change without responsibility for what follows. God mode threatens this arrangement. If reality is responding to your state rather than your effort, then outcomes are no longer accidents. If timing reflects alignment rather than luck, then delay is no longer external. If experience mirrors coherence, then suffering is no longer meaningless but instructive. This realization is unbearable for the identity, so it resists not power but authorship. The ego does not fear insignificance as much as it fears culpability. It prefers to be small and innocent rather than vast and accountable. It would rather believe it is powerless than admit it is creative. Power implies choice. Choice implies consequence. Consequence implies responsibility. This chain is why God mode is often unconsciously avoided. People sabotage immediacy not because they doubt it works, but because they fear what it would say about them if it did. If life really is responding, then what does that mean about past pain, about missed opportunities, about relationships that failed? The mind would rather believe in chaos than face authorship, so it constructs innocence through helplessness. I didn't know. I couldn't help it. It wasn't my fault. These thoughts feel relieving. They absolve, but they also imprison. Innocence achieved through powerlessness is not innocence at all. It is avoidance. True innocence does not come from denying responsibility. It comes from releasing guilt. This distinction is essential. Guilt is what keeps power dormant. Guilt whispers that if you had authority, you would misuse it. That if you were truly creative, you would be dangerous. That if you could shape reality, you would cause harm, intentionally or not. This belief is rarely conscious. It lives in the nervous system, the emotional body, the inherited moral codes of family and culture. It says, better to be limited than to be wrong. So power is kept at a distance, manifestation is slowed, clarity is postponed, authority is diluted. The universe does not impose this limit. You do, not as punishment but as protection. Protection from guilt. Consider how often people shrink right after success, how they sabotage momentum, how they apologize for clarity, how they downplay impact. These behaviors are not humility. They are guilt management. They say, I don't want to be responsible for the consequences of my power. But responsibility is not burden. It is participation. The fear is not of causing harm. The fear is of being seen as the cause at all. God mode removes plausible deniability. When things work quickly, you cannot attribute them to chance. When alignment produces results effortlessly, you cannot hide behind struggle. When reality responds immediately, you are exposed as a participant rather than a bystander. This exposure terrifies the identity, so it invents delays, it complicates processes, and it insists on gradualism. Gradualism spreads responsibility over time. It allows you to say, I'm still learning. It softens authorship. It keeps innocence intact by postponing authority. But innocence built on postponement is fragile. True innocence is not the absence of responsibility. It is the absence of guilt. When guilt dissolves, responsibility becomes light, natural, even joyful. You stop asking, what if I get it wrong? And start asking, what wants to move through me? This shift is subtle but decisive. The universe does not punish mistakes. It responds to coherence. Guilt introduces incoherence. It fractures authority. It tells reality, I am not safe with my own power. So reality agrees. The path forward is not absolution through effort. It is absolution through recognition. Recognize that you did not create the rules of this system. You did not invent responsiveness. You did not design consciousness. You are participating in a structure far older than your personal history. You are not guilty for how reality works. You are not at fault for being creative. You are not dangerous for being aligned. This recognition restores innocence, not the innocence of helplessness, but the innocence of alignment. Children are powerful because they are innocent in this way. They act without guilt. They imagine without apology. They move without rehearsing consequences. Their power is unself-conscious. As conditioning sets in, guilt replaces innocence. Power becomes suspect. Expression becomes monitored. Authority is handed over to systems, rules, and external validation. God mode is not about reclaiming dominance. It is about reclaiming innocence. Innocence says, I am allowed to be aligned. Innocence says, I can respond without justification. Innocence says, I do not need to diminish my impact to be safe. When innocence returns, responsibility no longer feels heavy. It feels obvious. You respond when response is required. You act when action is needed. You adjust when adjustment becomes clear. There is no self-blame, no self-congratulation, just participation. This is why guilt must be seen, not fought. Fighting guilt reinforces it. Seeing it dissolves it. Notice where you hesitate after clarity. Notice where you slow down after alignment. Notice where you soften your certainty to avoid standing out. Ask quietly, what am I afraid of being responsible for? Do not answer with explanation. Let the sensation speak. You may feel tightness, heat, resistance. That is guilt surfacing, not as accusation, but as information. Let it be there without judgment. The moment guilt is allowed without identification, it loses its grip. It cannot survive awareness without narrative. It needs justification. Silence deprives it of fuel, and when guilt dissolves, innocence returns naturally. Not childish innocence, creative innocence. The innocence that knows power is not personal, that authorship is shared with the whole, that alignment does not isolate you, it integrates you. This chapter is not asking you to take responsibility for everything that has happened. It is asking you to release the belief that responsibility is dangerous. When responsibility is no longer feared, God mode no longer needs to hide. Reality responds quickly not because you are controlling it, but because nothing inside you is resisting being a participant. You stop shrinking, you stop delaying. You stop pretending to be smaller than you are, and in that honesty, something profound happens. Power feels safe, because innocence has returned, not as an excuse, but as truth. Chapter 13. The Myth of Readiness. Readiness is one of the most convincing illusions the mind has ever produced. It sounds wise, it feels responsible, it promises safety. I'll act when I'm ready, I'll speak when I'm ready, and I'll step forward when I'm ready. But readiness, as it is commonly understood, does not exist. It is a moving horizon, always visible, never reachable. The mind invented readiness to delay action without admitting fear. It reframed hesitation as prudence. It turned avoidance into virtue. And because this transformation sounded intelligent, it went unquestioned. Yet reality does not respond to readiness. It responds to availability. Availability is present moment openness. Readiness is future-oriented reassurance. One allows movement, the other postpones it. The myth of readiness assumes there is a version of you in the future who will feel more certain, more confident, more complete. This version is imagined as better equipped to act, less likely to fail, less exposed to consequence. But this version never arrives. Why? Because readiness is not a state that emerges with time. It is a feeling that appears after action, not before it. Confidence follows movement. Clarity follows commitment. Safety follows presence. The order has been reversed. You were taught to wait for inner permission before acting. In reality, permission is granted retroactively, once action proves survivable. The nervous system learns by experience, not by anticipation. This is why waiting to feel ready feels endless. The system you are waiting on requires the very action you are postponing in order to update. Readiness is circular. The mind prefers it because it removes risk. If you never act, you never fail. If you never choose, you never err. If you never step forward, you never discover what you cannot control. But you also never discover what moves through you effortlessly. God mode does not activate when you are ready. It activates when you stop waiting. Waiting sends a clear signal to reality. I am not available yet. Reality respects this. It does not rush you. It mirrors your stance with delay. This delay is not punishment. It is consent. When you say not yet, reality says as you wish. The irony is that the moment you act without readiness, readiness appears. The body recalibrates. The mind reorganizes. The nervous system updates its map. You discover that what you feared was survivable, often trivial, sometimes even irrelevant. This discovery cannot be imagined in advance. It must be lived. Readiness is a thought. Availability is a posture. Availability does not mean recklessness. It means openness to response. It means willingness to be changed by what happens rather than protected from it. This willingness collapses time. The mind argues, but what if I'm not prepared? Prepared for what? Life? You are already in it. You do not prepare to breathe before breathing. You do not rehearse balance before walking. These functions operate because the system is designed to adjust in motion. Consciousness is the same. You are more adaptive than you have been taught to believe. The myth of readiness hides a deeper fear, the fear of irreversibility. Action changes things. Once chosen, a path closes behind you. The identity fears this narrowing. It wants to keep all options open. But infinite options are paralyzing. Movement requires commitment. Commitment creates direction. Direction produces consequence. And consequence is what the identity fears. So readiness becomes a loophole, a way to appear responsible while avoiding commitment. Yet God mode cannot operate through loopholes. It requires decisiveness. Not emotional decisiveness, but existential decisiveness. A willingness to stand where you are and move from there without guarantees. This decisiveness is not loud. It is quiet and immediate. It says, "This is where I am. This is what is available. I move now." Not because you feel ready, but because readiness is irrelevant. The universe does not need you to be prepared. It needs you to be present. Presence is enough. When presence is complete, intelligence flows. When intelligence flows, response emerges. When response emerges, the next step becomes obvious. The mind protests because it wants the whole map. Presence gives only the next step, but the next step is all that has ever been required. Readiness promises certainty before action. Presence offers clarity during action. The first is impossible. The second is reliable. This is why those who wait for readiness often watch others move seemingly effortlessly. They assume those others must have felt more confident, more certain, more prepared. They did not. They were simply more available. Availability does not mean absence of fear. Fear may still arise, but fear no longer vetoes movement. It becomes information, not instruction. Readiness gives fear authority. Availability does not. The shift from readiness to availability is subtle but radical. It removes the final excuse for delay. It places responsibility back in the present moment, where it belongs. You do not need to feel aligned to act. You act and alignment follows. This does not mean forcing. Forcing is still resistance. Availability is softness combined with movement. It is action without armor. This chapter is not urging you to leap blindly. It is inviting you to notice how often readiness is used to postpone what is already clear. Notice the moments when you say soon. Notice the plans that never become steps. Notice the insights that never become motion. Ask yourself quietly, what would I do if readiness were not required? Let the question sit without answering. You may feel a tightening. That tightening is not danger. It is the identity losing a familiar delay mechanism. Stay with it. The moment you act without readiness, something profound happens. The system recalibrates around movement instead of anticipation. God mode does not announce itself, but timing sharpens. Coincidence increases. Response accelerates, not because you finally prepared enough, but because you stopped waiting for permission to be alive. Readiness was never missing. It was never coming. Availability was the key all along, and availability exists only now. Chapter 14. Instant alignment versus emotional work. There is a quiet misunderstanding that keeps many locked in delay. It sounds compassionate, and it sounds wise, and it sounds like healing. I still have emotions to process. I need to work through this first. Once I clear this, then things will move. This belief feels responsible. It promises wholeness before power. It suggests that alignment must wait until every inner knot is untangled. But alignment does not wait for resolution. It precedes it. Emotional work and alignment are not the same process. Confusing them creates unnecessary delay. Emotional work is retrospective. It looks backward. It examines memory, meaning, and interpretation. It asks why something happened, how it felt, and what it shaped. This work can be valuable. It can bring understanding, compassion, and integration. But emotional work operates in time. Alignment does not. Alignment is immediate. It is not concerned with history. It does not require explanation. It does not need emotions to be resolved in order to function. This is the part that unsettles the mind. You were taught that unresolved emotions block power. That pain must be healed before movement is safe. That clarity must be earned through processing. This teaching is incomplete. Unresolved emotion does not block alignment. Identification with emotion does. An emotion can be present without being in charge. Sadness can exist without directing action. Fear can arise without dictating response. Anger can move through without becoming identity. Alignment does not require emotional absence, it requires non-identification. The mistake is believing that feeling something means you must wait. This belief keeps people circling the same inner terrain endlessly. They process, analyze, revisit, and refine, always preparing for a future moment when alignment will finally be allowed. That moment never arrives. Because alignment is not granted by completion. It is available in the middle of feeling. Instant alignment does not bypass emotion. It bypasses ownership. When you stop saying this emotion is me and start noticing this emotion is present, a shift occurs. Awareness regains priority. The emotion continues, but it no longer controls timing. This distinction changes everything. The mind resists it because emotional work gives identity a role. There is a self who is healing, progressing, improving. This narrative feels purposeful. It gives meaning to delay. Instant alignment threatens this narrative. It says, you can act now, even while feeling this. That feels dangerous to a system trained to equate emotion with incapacity. But notice something from your own experience. How many times have you acted effectively while still feeling uncertain? How often have you shown up despite sadness? How many crucial decisions were made in moments that were emotionally imperfect? Life does not pause for emotional resolution. Neither does alignment. The universe does not wait for you to feel better. It responds to coherence. Coherence means awareness leading, not emotion. Emotion is information, not instruction. When emotion becomes instruction, action stalls. When emotion is allowed as sensation while awareness leads, action sharpens. This is why some people move forward rapidly without appearing emotionally healed. It is not because they are bypassing, it is because they are not delaying. Emotional work becomes bypassing only when it is used to avoid presence. Alignment becomes bypassing only when emotion is denied. The balance is subtle. You do not need to suppress emotion to align. You need to stop postponing alignment until emotion disappears. Emotion resolves faster when alignment is restored. This is the paradox the mind struggles with. It assumes resolution creates alignment. In reality, alignment allows resolution. When awareness is primary, emotions move more freely. They complete their cycles without resistance. They are felt fully and released naturally. When identity is leading, emotions stagnate. They loop, they repeat, they demand attention through intensity. Alignment is the solvent. This is why instant shifts sometimes occur without long emotional processing. It is not that the emotion was ignored, it is that the system reorganized around coherence, allowing the emotion to move through instead of block. The body knows this. When alignment is present, breath deepens even if sadness remains. Muscles soften even if fear is present. Movement becomes possible even if grief is active. These are signs that alignment has returned. Emotional work often focuses on content. Alignment focuses on orientation. Content can change endlessly. Orientation changes instantly. The mind prefers content because it is tangible. It can be named, discussed, and improved. Orientation is felt, not analyzed. This chapter is not dismissing emotional work. It is removing its false authority over timing. You are not required to finish feeling before acting. You are required to remain aware while feeling. That is all. When awareness leads, emotion follows. When emotion leads, awareness recedes. This does not mean suppressing feeling. It means not confusing feeling with self. Notice the subtle shift when you say, I am anxious versus anxiety is present. The first collapses identity into sensation. The second restores space. In that space, alignment becomes possible immediately. Instant alignment does not mean instant happiness. It means instant coherence. Happiness may follow, or it may not. But action will be clean either way. The universe does not wait for your mood. It responds to your orientation. This is why God mode is available even on difficult days, especially on difficult days. Alignment does not require emotional perfection. It requires honesty. Honesty says, this is what is present, and I am still here. That presence is enough. Emotional work can continue alongside alignment. It no longer dictates pace. It becomes supportive rather than restrictive. You process as you move. You feel as you act. You integrate as you live. This is how life actually unfolds. The belief that you must be fully healed before being effective is not compassion. It is a misunderstanding that keeps power postponed. Alignment does not ask you to be finished. It asks you to be present, and presence is always available, regardless of what you are feeling. When you stop waiting for emotions to clear, something unexpected happens. Emotions clear faster, not because they are forced, but because they are no longer obstructing movement. The system breathes again. Instant alignment is not denial, it is leadership. And leadership does not wait for perfect conditions. It responds now. Chapter 15. Reality as a mirror with no memory. Reality does not remember who you were yesterday. It does not care how long something has been broken. It does not hold grudges, records, or narratives. It reflects what is present now. This truth is unsettling because it removes both blame and comfort. There is no punishment for the past, but there is also no credit. Reality does not reward effort simply because it was effort. It responds to coherence in the moment it appears. The mirror has no memory. You have been taught to believe that time accumulates weight, that history matters, that patterns must be slowly undone, that the past casts long shadows over the present. These beliefs feel true because memory is vivid, emotion lingers, habit repeats, but repetition is not memory, it is reenactment. Reality does not replay your past, you do. Each moment you reintroduce yesterday through identity, expectation, and anticipation. The mirror simply reflects what stands before it. If what stands before it is history, history appears to continue. This is not cruelty, it is precision. The universe does not require forgiveness. It does not need to be convinced to let go. It has already released everything the instant it occurred. The burden of continuity lives only in the perceiver. This is why change can be instant, and why it so rarely is. The mind insists that transformation must honor history, that healing must take time proportional to pain, that repair must match damage. But reality does not operate on fairness, it operates on resonance. When resonance changes, reflection changes immediately. This is why people experience sudden shifts that defy explanation. Addictions fall away overnight. Grief lifts without warning. Patterns dissolve without effort. The mirror did not change. The stance before it did. The mind struggles to accept this because it undermines causality as identity understands it. If reality has no memory, then justification loses power. Excuses lose validity. Stories lose authority. You cannot say, "This happened because of that," and expect the mirror to comply. The mirror only sees now. This is not to say that trauma is imaginary or pain irrelevant. It is to say that the continuation of those experiences depends on present identification, not past events. Pain leaves impressions in the nervous system. Memory stores association. Habit reinforces behavior. But none of these are reality's memory. They are internal patterns being represented. The mirror is neutral. This neutrality is what gives you power. If reality remembered, you would be trapped. If the past had authority, change would require negotiation. If history governed response, immediacy would be impossible. But because the mirror has no memory, the present holds absolute leverage. The difficulty lies in standing there. To stand fully in the present means relinquishing the identity that relies on continuity. It means letting go of the story that explains why things are the way they are. It means allowing yourself to be unrecognizable to your own past. This feels like betrayal to the ego. The ego says, if I let go of my story, who am I? Presence answers, available. Availability is enough. The mirror does not ask you to prove you have changed. It does not require evidence. It does not verify progress. It reflects what is offered. Offer hesitation, it reflects delay. Offer clarity, it reflects movement. Offer coherence, it reflects alignment, immediately. This is why affirmations often fail. They are spoken from a stance that contradicts them. The words say one thing, the present says another. The mirror reflects presence. This is why effort feels unrewarded. Effort looks backward. It references past struggle. It expects credit. The mirror does not grant credit. It responds to current state. This feels unfair to the part of you that has worked hard. But fairness is a human concept. The universe is functional. It asks only one question: what is here now? Answer honestly. If fear is here, reflect fear. If authority is here, reflect authority. If waiting is here, reflect waiting. There is no judgment in this, only feedback. This feedback is misunderstood as fate. It is mistaken for destiny. But it is simply reflection without memory. Once you understand this, guilt loses leverage. Regret dissolves. The past loses its grip, not because it was erased, but because it was never stored externally to begin with. The only place the past exists is in attention. When attention stops feeding it, it fades. This does not require effort. Effort implies resistance. It requires redirection. Attention follows identity. When identity loosens, attention returns to the present. When attention returns, the mirror responds differently. This is why people who have nothing to lose often experience rapid change. Their identity has collapsed. They are no longer invested in maintaining continuity. They stand in the present by necessity. The mirror responds. You do not need collapse to access this. You need honesty. Honesty says, I am not who I was. Honesty says, I do not need my past to justify my present. Honesty says, I can stand here without explanation. This honesty is alignment. The mirror reflects alignment instantly. This chapter is not suggesting you deny your past. It is inviting you to stop dragging it forward as proof of what must continue. Your memories can remain. Your lessons can remain. Your experiences can remain. But they do not get to lead. Reality does not remember your failures. It does not remember your trauma. It does not remember your effort. It reflects what is offered now. This is terrifying to the ego and liberating to awareness. The ego wants guarantees. The mirror offers immediacy. You cannot negotiate with immediacy. You can only inhabit it. When you do, something irreversible happens. You stop explaining yourself to reality. You stop asking for permission to be new. You stop referencing who you were as evidence of what you can be. The mirror responds, not tomorrow, not gradually, now, because now is all it has ever known. And now, finally, so do you. Chapter 16. The disappearance of asking. Asking is a habit learned early. You ask for permission, you ask for approval, you ask for outcomes to arrive. Asking feels humble, it feels respectful. It feels like the correct posture before something greater than you. And for a long time, this posture seemed necessary. But asking contains a hidden assumption. It assumes separation. To ask is to position yourself outside of what you seek. It says, I do not have this. I am not this. I must request it from elsewhere. Even when asking is spiritual, even when it is framed as prayer or intention, the structure remains the same. There is you. There is the desired outcome. There is distance between them. This distance creates time. The universe does not respond to asking the way the mind imagines. It does not evaluate requests. It does not weigh worthiness. It does not deliberate. It mirrors stance. And asking is a stance of distance. This is why asking often produces delay. Not because the universe is withholding, but because the posture of asking signals that alignment has not yet been assumed. It says, I am waiting. Reality agrees. Waiting is respected, but waiting is not required. The disappearance of asking is not arrogance. It is intimacy. It arises when separation dissolves and alignment becomes implicit rather than requested. In God mode, asking feels unnecessary, not because desire vanishes, but because orientation shifts. You no longer stand outside the movement of life requesting change. You stand inside it, allowing response. This is subtle, and the mind resists it. The mind believes that if you stop asking, nothing will happen. It fears silence will be mistaken for indifference. But the opposite is true. Silence clarifies signal. Asking introduces noise. It often carries doubt, hope, fear, and expectation layered together. These layers contradict one another. The signal becomes complex. Reality mirrors complexity with delay. When asking disappears, what remains is recognition. Recognition says, this is already coherent. Recognition says, movement is appropriate now. Recognition says nothing at all, and because it says nothing, it does not contradict itself. This is why experienced practitioners often speak less. They do not repeat intentions. They do not reinforce beliefs. They do not check whether things are working. They have learned that checking is a form of asking, and asking destabilizes alignment. They move, they adjust, they respond. Response replaces request. This is not passive acceptance. It is active participation without negotiation. Consider how your body functions. You do not ask your heart to beat. You do not request digestion. You do not pray for balance while walking. These processes occur because alignment exists, not because permission was granted. Creation works the same way. Asking is appropriate only when alignment is absent. It is a bridge from separation to coherence. But once coherence is restored, the bridge is no longer needed. Many remain on the bridge indefinitely. They ask and ask and ask, mistaking repetition for devotion. They believe persistence is proof of sincerity. But persistence in asking often reinforces the assumption that something is missing. Reality hears the assumption, not the sincerity. The moment you stop asking, something feels exposed. There is no longer a ritual to hide behind, no words to speak, no request to repeat, just presence. Presence feels vulnerable to the identity. Without asking, there is nothing to blame if nothing happens. Without asking, you cannot say, "I tried." You are simply there, aligned or not. This honesty is what allows response to accelerate. When asking disappears, command does not replace it. Allowing does. Allowing is not passive. It is the absence of obstruction. It is standing in coherence and letting reality do what it already knows how to do. You do not ask gravity to hold you. You do not ask fire to burn. You do not ask light to illuminate. You align with their properties, and they respond automatically. The same is true of consciousness. When you align with clarity, clarity manifests. When you align with decisiveness, movement occurs. When you align with openness, opportunity appears. No request required. This does not mean desire is wrong. Desire is the signal of movement wanting expression. Asking is what often distorts it. Desire arises naturally. Asking overlays it with identity, doubt, and timeline. The disappearance of asking allows desire to return to its original function. Direction, not demand. Direction does not beg, it orients. This is why God mode feels less emotional. Not cold, clean. There is less pleading, less hoping, less waiting. There is more noticing, more responding, more adjusting. The universe does not need to be convinced. It needs you to stop contradicting yourself. Asking contradicts alignment when alignment is already present. This chapter is not instructing you to never ask for help. Asking another human for support is relational, not metaphysical. But asking reality to deliver what you are not standing aligned with only reinforces the gap. When alignment is real, asking fades naturally. You may notice that when something is truly settled inside you, you stop talking about it. You stop seeking validation. You stop requesting reassurance. You move as if it is already done. This is not pretending, it is coherence. The universe responds to coherence immediately because there is nothing to reconcile. Asking introduces reconciliation. If you still find yourself asking, do not judge it. Asking is a transitional behavior. It shows that alignment is forming but not yet stable. Let asking be what it is, then let it dissolve. The moment you stop repeating the request, the system quiets. The signal clarifies. Timing sharpens. This is often the moment things suddenly happen, not because you asked better, but because you stopped asking at all. The disappearance of asking is not something you force. It happens when you realize there is no one else to ask, not because you are alone, but because you are inside the process, not outside it. When this recognition settles, something irreversible occurs. You stop orienting toward outcomes as if they are elsewhere. You stop speaking to the universe as if it were separate. You listen instead. And in listening, response is already happening. Asking was never wrong. It was just temporary. Alignment is permanent. When you stand in it, words fall away, and what remains moves freely, without request, without delay, without doubt. Chapter 17. The Threshold of No Return. There is a moment that does not announce itself. No light breaks the sky. No voice declares arrival. Yet once crossed, nothing functions the same way again. This moment is not dramatic. It is quiet, almost ordinary. And that is why so many miss it. They are waiting for confirmation when what actually changes is orientation. The threshold of no return is not an achievement. It is a recognition that cannot be undone. Before this threshold, alignment is something you visit. You touch it, glimpse it, step into it briefly. Afterward, alignment becomes the reference point. Everything else orbits around it. This shift is irreversible not because it grants permanent bliss, but because it removes plausible deniability. Once you see how reality responds to coherence, you cannot unsee it. You may still hesitate. You may still feel fear. You may still experience doubt. But you will know, deeply, unmistakably, that these are not obstacles imposed by the universe. They are internal signals asking for alignment. The universe is no longer blamed. This is what makes the threshold so confronting. Before crossing it, you can still believe in luck, fate, timing, or external permission. After crossing it, these explanations feel hollow, not wrong, insufficient. You see too clearly. The threshold is crossed the first time you act from alignment, and reality responds immediately enough that coincidence becomes implausible. The timing is too precise, the response too exact, the feedback too clean. Something clicks, not intellectually, viscerally. You realize you were never negotiating with the universe. You were negotiating with yourself. This realization carries weight. It removes the comfort of victimhood and the drama of struggle. It also removes the excuse of ignorance. From this point on, delay feels different. Delay no longer feels like punishment or failure. It feels informative. It says, something inside you is not fully aligned yet. And because you know this, you cannot ignore it. You stop asking why things aren't happening. You start asking where coherence is missing. This is the point of no return. The mind may attempt to go back. It may say, that was a coincidence. You're overestimating your influence. Be careful. These thoughts arise from fear, not reason. They are attempts to restore ambiguity. But ambiguity no longer satisfies. You have felt the mechanism. This is why people who cross this threshold often become quieter. Not secretive, precise. They stop explaining themselves to those who cannot feel what they have felt. Words fall short. Proof feels unnecessary. They are not superior. They are simply no longer confused about where authority resides. The threshold does not make you special. It makes you responsible. Responsible not for controlling everything, but for noticing when you are misaligned. Responsible for your stance. Responsible for your signal. This responsibility is not heavy. It is clarifying. Before, you could scatter energy and blame circumstances. After, you feel the cost of incoherence immediately. Hesitation feels louder. Self-betrayal feels heavier. Delay feels intentional. This awareness is not cruel. It is efficient. The threshold of no return is often crossed accidentally. Someone releases control out of exhaustion. Someone acts decisively without preparation. Someone stops asking and simply moves. Reality responds. And the memory of that response becomes a new reference point. From then on, the old explanations no longer fit. You cannot unlearn gravity once you've felt it pull. This does not mean life becomes easy. Ease is not the promise. Precision is. You stop living in vague hope and start living in exact feedback. You know when you are aligned because movement is clean. You know when you are not because friction appears. There is no moral judgment in this, no reward or punishment, just response. This is why some fear crossing the threshold. It removes fantasy. It dissolves the idea that someday everything will align without you having to align first. The threshold says, now matters, not someday, not eventually. Now. This can feel overwhelming if you believe you must be perfect, but perfection is not required. Honesty is. You will still make mistakes. You will still choose poorly at times, but you will know when you do. And that knowing becomes the course correction. Before the threshold, mistakes are confusing. After, they are instructive. This is why the threshold cannot be crossed through theory. Understanding does not activate it. Experience does. The experience is always the same, alignment followed by unmistakable response. Once that circuit closes, the system recalibrates. You stop seeking permission. You stop waiting for readiness. You stop explaining delay as destiny. You act, you observe, you adjust. This is the rhythm beyond the threshold. There is no final arrival, no permanent state, but there is no going back to unconscious waiting. The mind may still crave certainty, but you know certainty comes from coherence, not prediction. You may still feel fear, but you know fear is not a stop sign, only a signal. You may still hesitate, but you know hesitation has a source you can locate. The threshold of no return is not mystical. It is mechanical. It is crossed the moment you stop believing that reality is doing something to you. You see that reality is responding to you, not judging, not testing, responding. And once this is seen, the old story collapses. You are no longer trying to manifest. You are no longer trying to awaken. You are no longer trying to activate power. You are participating consciously. This participation is the point of no return. Because once you know where the lever is, pretending it doesn't exist becomes impossible. You can still choose not to pull it, but you will know that you are choosing, and that knowing changes everything. Forever. Chapter 18. Why this cannot be taught gradually. There are truths that unfold step by step, and there are truths that arrive whole. This is one of the latter. The mind insists on gradual teaching because it believes understanding accumulates. It wants concepts layered carefully, one insight building upon another, until mastery is achieved. This model works for skills, systems, and information. It does not work for recognition. Recognition is instantaneous. You either see it or you do not. And once seen, no amount of forgetting can truly undo it. This is why what you are encountering here cannot be taught gradually. Gradual teaching implies that something is being added over time. But nothing is being added. What is happening is subtraction. Illusion falls away. Assumption dissolves. Misidentification collapses. Subtraction does not require time, it requires honesty. The mind resists this because gradualism preserves control. It allows the ego to adapt slowly, to negotiate its surrender, to remain relevant throughout the process. Instant recognition offers no such courtesy. It exposes the mechanism all at once. This exposure feels dangerous to the identity. If everything is revealed immediately, there is no space to prepare defenses, no time to reshape the story, no opportunity to remain partially asleep while claiming progress. So the mind argues for pacing. This is too much too fast. People aren't ready for this. Truth must be earned. But these arguments are not about safety. They are about preservation of self-image. Truth does not arrive in pieces. Interpretation does. The mind confuses the two. When recognition happens, it happens fully. The delay that follows is not in truth itself, but in the willingness to live from what has been seen. Integration takes time. Living rearranges itself, habits dissolve, relationships recalibrate, but the seeing itself is immediate. This is why those who cross the threshold often say, "I don't know how I didn't see this before." Not because the information was missing, but because the willingness was. Willingness is the only prerequisite. This cannot be taught gradually because gradual teaching keeps the mind busy. It gives it tasks, goals, milestones. It creates the sense of movement without requiring surrender. But this work requires surrender, not surrender to an authority. Surrender of authority falsely claimed by the mind. The moment the mind relinquishes its position as gatekeeper, recognition floods in. Not dramatically, not emotionally, clearly. This clarity is simple, too simple. And because it is simple, the mind rejects it as insufficient. Surely there must be more. Surely it can't be this easy. This reaction is predictable. Complexity flatters the ego, simplicity humbles it. Gradual teaching allows complexity to mask simplicity. Instant recognition removes the mask. This is why spiritual traditions often used shock, paradox, or silence. Not to confuse, but to bypass gradual comprehension. They understood that some truths cannot be reasoned into. They must be encountered directly. The mind wants steps. Reality offers orientation. Once orientation shifts, steps organize themselves naturally. Before that, steps go nowhere. This chapter exists to clarify why nothing here is meant to be slowly absorbed. You are not being trained. You are being reminded. Reminder does not require rehearsal. If something in you feels unsettled, that is not overload. It is proximity. Recognition destabilizes the false sense of continuity the ego relies on. It interrupts the story of becoming. The mind protests because it prefers to believe enlightenment, power, or alignment are rare achievements. This belief protects it from responsibility. If truth is rare, failure to live it is excusable. But if truth is immediate, excuses dissolve. This is uncomfortable and necessary. Gradualism offers comfort. Recognition offers freedom. Freedom is not gentle to the structures that confine you. This is why the teaching feels sharp, why it seems to cut rather than build, why it does not offer reassurance before removing illusion. Reassurance would delay recognition. You do not need to understand everything written here. Understanding happens later. What matters is whether something in you has already recognized the orientation being pointed to. If it has, no further teaching is required. If it has not, no amount of teaching will suffice. This is not elitism, it is mechanics. Recognition happens when resistance drops. Resistance drops when pretending becomes exhausting. Often this happens suddenly, a moment of honesty, a collapse of effort, a release of identity. And then you see. Once seen, the mind may try to reinterpret, reframe, or dilute it. But the orientation has shifted. You know where coherence comes from. You know where delay originates. This knowing cannot be made gradual. It is the difference between believing fire is hot and touching it. No explanation replaces contact. This chapter does not ask you to rush. It asks you to stop expecting slowness. Truth does not trickle. It strikes, and when it does not ask for permission to be whole. It simply reveals what was already the case. All at once. Chapter 19. Living without negotiation. Negotiation is subtle. It does not always sound like doubt. Often it sounds like reason. Let me think about it. Maybe later. I'll see how this unfolds. I'll wait for a clearer sign. These phrases feel intelligent, measured, safe. But beneath them lies a habit so deeply ingrained it often goes unnoticed. Negotiation is the mind's way of postponing alignment. It assumes that reality must be bargained with, that timing must be agreed upon. That action requires favorable conditions, reassurance, or confirmation. Negotiation keeps authority external. It places power somewhere else and positions you as a participant waiting for approval. Living without negotiation removes this middle layer. When negotiation ends, movement becomes direct, not reckless, not impulsive, direct. This does not mean you say yes to everything. It means when clarity is present, you no longer dilute it with delay. You do not bargain with what you already know. You do not ask reality to convince you twice. Negotiation arises from mistrust, not mistrust of the universe, but mistrust of yourself. It says, I don't fully trust this knowing yet. So it stalls, it hedges, it delays. But clarity does not grow clearer with negotiation. It fades. The longer you hesitate after clarity, the more noise enters. Thought reclaims authority. Emotion reshapes certainty. Fear reframes intuition as impulse. Negotiation feels safer, but it weakens signal. Reality responds to decisiveness, not deliberation. This is not because decisiveness is aggressive, it is because decisiveness is coherent. There is one signal instead of many, one direction instead of conflicting vectors. Negotiation fragments authority. This is why God mode feels uncompromising, not harsh but clean. There is no internal debate once alignment is felt. Action follows without commentary. This is unsettling to the identity. The identity survives by negotiating. It weighs options, considers consequences, imagines alternatives. It wants to keep doors open. But coherence closes doors naturally. When you move in one direction fully, other possibilities fall away. This feels like loss to the ego. It is actually focus. Living without negotiation does not mean living without choice. It means choosing without delay. Choice does not require certainty. It requires alignment. Alignment is felt, not argued into. You have experienced this before. Moments when you knew something was finished. A conversation, a habit, a relationship. There was no discussion, no internal meeting, just an ending. Negotiation had no place. Notice how clean those moments feel in retrospect. There is no lingering doubt about whether you should have waited longer. The knowing was complete. That completeness is available far more often than you allow. Negotiation trains you to mistrust it. You wait for more signs, more evidence, more reassurance. But reassurance is infinite if you keep asking for it. There will always be another angle to consider. Living without negotiation is not about ignoring information. It is about recognizing when information has already done its job. At some point, gathering more data becomes avoidance. The nervous system feels this. Tension increases, energy scatters, momentum stalls. These are not signs to wait. They are signs that clarity is being resisted. When you stop negotiating, the body relaxes. Not because the outcome is guaranteed, but because alignment has been restored. Alignment feels like relief. This is why people often feel lighter after making a difficult decision, even if the consequences are uncertain. The relief comes from ending negotiation, not from predicting success. The universe responds to this relief. Not because relief is a reward, but because relief signals coherence. It tells reality, the signal is stable now. Stable signals produce fast response, and negotiation destabilizes signal. This chapter is not advocating impulsivity. Impulsivity reacts to discomfort. Living without negotiation responds to clarity. The difference is subtle but decisive. Impulsivity seeks escape. Clarity seeks expression. You can feel the difference in your body. Impulsivity feels sharp, urgent, pressured. Clarity feels steady, grounded, inevitable. When clarity is present, negotiation is unnecessary. Yet many override this steadiness because it lacks drama. They expect certainty to feel intense. When it feels calm, they doubt it. This doubt is learned. You were taught that important decisions must be difficult, that ease is suspicious, that struggle validates significance. These beliefs keep negotiation alive. But significance does not require struggle. Alignment does not require suffering. Living without negotiation is not about being rigid. It is about being honest. Honesty says, "This is clear to me now," and then it moves. Not tomorrow, not after one more check, now. This does not mean you never pause. It means pauses are chosen, not defaulted to. Silence becomes intentional, not avoidant. The shift is subtle but profound. When you stop negotiating with your own clarity, you stop negotiating with reality. You stop asking it to convince you. You meet it where you already are. Reality responds in kind. Movement accelerates. Timing sharpens. Opportunities align with less friction, not because you forced them, but because you stopped interfering. Living without negotiation is not domination. It is congruence. You do not push life. You stop pulling away. This chapter invites you to notice where you bargain with what you already know, where you delay not because you are unsure, but because you are afraid of being sure. That fear is not weakness, it is conditioning. Let it be there and move anyway. When you do, something unexpected happens. Negotiation falls silent. The mind steps back, the body aligns, and life, finally unopposed, moves with you, cleanly, decisively, without asking twice. That is what it means to live without negotiation. And once you taste it, returning to bargaining feels unnecessary. Because clarity, once honored, becomes self-reinforcing, and alignment, once trusted, becomes your new normal. Chapter 20. The Spacious Now. The mind lives in transit, always moving between what was and what might be, rarely arriving where it already is. This movement feels natural because it has been practiced for so long. You learned early to anticipate, to prepare, to remember. You learned to leave the present moment in search of improvement or protection, and in doing so, you learned to miss the only place where power operates, the now. Not the dramatic now, not the urgent now, the spacious now. The spacious now is not a point in time. It is an absence of resistance to time. It is what remains when attention stops bracing for the next moment or defending against the last. In this now, nothing is missing. This is difficult for the mind to accept because the mind is trained to equate stillness with stagnation. It believes movement is necessary for progress, but the spacious now is not static. It is alive, responsive, and full of potential. It is where action originates cleanly. Most people try to use the present moment as a stepping stone. They stand in now only to look ahead. They inhabit the present just long enough to plan the future or evaluate the past. This creates tension. The now becomes narrow, compressed by expectation. The spacious now appears only when you stop using it as a means to an end. When you allow this moment to be enough, something shifts. The body relaxes, the breath deepens, attention widens. You are no longer reaching forward or pulling backward. You are here. This presence is not passive. It is alert without strain, open without anticipation. From here, movement arises naturally. Not because you are trying to go somewhere, but because response is appropriate. The universe does not operate in the future. It does not correct the past. It responds now. When you live in anticipation, you ask reality to meet you somewhere that does not exist. When you live in regret, you ask it to revisit what is no longer here. Both requests create delay. The spacious now removes the request entirely. This is why things often resolve when you stop thinking about them. Not because thinking is wrong, but because thinking relocates you. When attention returns, the system recalibrates. Solutions appear because they were always available. Timing aligns because nothing is being postponed. Clarity emerges because noise has quieted. The spacious now is not something you enter through effort. Effort collapses it. It appears when effort ends. You cannot force yourself into presence. You can only stop leaving. Notice how often you mentally lean forward, planning, worrying, rehearsing. These movements feel productive, but they narrow the now. They create urgency where none is required. Urgency is a contraction of presence. In urgency, the now feels insufficient. It becomes a problem to solve rather than a place to stand. Power disappears because power requires space. The spacious now restores that space. This is why God mode feels calm rather than intense. It does not rush because it is not behind. It does not grasp because nothing is missing. From the spacious now, action is precise. You say what needs to be said without rehearsal. You move when movement is needed without hesitation. You stop when stopping is appropriate without justification. This rhythm cannot be planned. It must be allowed. The mind fears this allowance because it removes control. But control is not the same as coherence. Control tightens, coherence opens. When coherence is present, reality responds smoothly. Not instantly in every case, but appropriately. Delays feel informative rather than frustrating. Movement feels supported rather than forced. The spacious now does not promise immediate gratification. It promises correct response. This is far more powerful. Living in the spacious now does not mean abandoning goals or ignoring consequences. It means not letting them occupy the present. Goals can exist in the background without pulling attention forward. Consequences can be acknowledged without fear. Presence holds everything without clinging to anything. This chapter does not ask you to remain in the now permanently. That would be another goal, another effort. It invites you to notice when you are absent and gently return. Return not with discipline, but with curiosity. What happens when you stop reaching? What happens when you stop reviewing? What happens when this moment is allowed to be complete? Often the answer is surprising. The spacious now is not empty. It is full of response. And when you live from here, even briefly, something becomes clear. Life was never waiting for you to catch up. It was waiting for you to arrive, here, now, and to discover that this moment, unadorned, unplanned, unmodified, is where everything you've been seeking has been quietly available all along. Chapter 21. The world responds before you speak. There comes a point when effort is no longer the signal, neither is intention, not even thought. Something else leads. At this stage, reality begins to respond before words are formed, before requests are made, before decisions are articulated. Events align ahead of explanation. Encounters arrive without search. Obstacles dissolve without confrontation. It feels as if life is listening in advance. This is not because the universe has suddenly become attentive. It is because your signal has become clean. When inner coherence stabilizes, response no longer waits for instruction. It anticipates, not in a mystical sense, but in a functional one. Coherence removes contradiction. Without contradiction, there is nothing to slow response. Most communication with reality is indirect. You speak one thing, feel another, expect a third. The mixed signal creates delay. Reality pauses, not in confusion, but in exact reflection. But when coherence settles, there is one signal. and one signal travels fast. This is when the world begins to respond before you speak. You notice it first in small ways. The message arrives before you decide to send it. The opportunity appears before you search. The solution forms before the problem feels solid. These moments are easy to dismiss. Coincidence is a convenient explanation, but as they accumulate, dismissal becomes difficult. The pattern is too consistent, the timing too precise. Something has shifted. The shift is not that you are predicting reality, it is that reality no longer needs to wait for clarification. Your presence communicates before language. Presence speaks. This is why silence becomes powerful at this stage. Not silence as avoidance, but silence as completeness. You no longer need to fill space with explanation. You no longer need to announce intention. Movement happens without rehearsal. The mind finds this unnerving. It is used to narrating life as it unfolds. When narration falls behind, the mind fears irrelevance. But relevance was never its role. The body understands this first. It relaxes into timing. Reactions soften. You stop bracing for impact. Trust emerges not as belief, but as familiarity. You have been here before in brief flashes, moments when everything clicked, when words felt unnecessary, when being was enough to move events. Those moments were not anomalies. They were previews. The reason they did not last was not because they were fragile. It was because you returned to interference. You checked, you questioned, you waited for confirmation. Confirmation is slower than coherence. When you stop asking whether things are aligned, they are. This is why the world begins to respond before you speak. You are no longer contradicting yourself internally. There is nothing to resolve. Response becomes reflexive. This does not mean life becomes perfect. Challenges still arise, but they arrive differently. Less as obstacles, more as adjustments. You feel them earlier, respond sooner, and move through them with less friction. The edge softens. This stage does not feel like power in the dramatic sense. It feels like cooperation. Like rowing with the current instead of across it. Effort still exists, but it is contextual, not compensatory. You do what is needed, no more, no less. The mind wants to claim this as mastery. It wants to build a new identity around it. This temptation is subtle. It sounds like pride, but it is actually fear. Fear of losing something that was never owned. The moment you try to hold this responsiveness, it fades, not as punishment, but as feedback. Holding is contraction. Contraction introduces delay, so you learn to let it move. You stop identifying with the response and stay with the coherence that allows it. You do not chase the effect. You honor the cause. This is why seasoned practitioners appear ordinary. They do not advertise alignment. They live it quietly. They trust it enough not to manage it. The world responds because there is nothing to argue with. This chapter is not promising miracles. It is describing mechanics. When coherence is stable, response is fast. When response is fast, language becomes secondary. You notice you are less reactive, less defensive, less eager to explain yourself. You act and things rearrange. You pause and clarity arrives. You stop trying to influence outcomes. You influence stance. Stance does the rest. The world responding before you speak is not a reward. It is a reflection, a mirror showing you that internal delay has ended. And once this becomes familiar, something unexpected happens. You stop needing proof, because the conversation between you and reality is no longer verbal. It is immediate, silent, and unmistakably alive. Chapter 22. You were never locked out. The final illusion is subtle. It does not feel like fear. It feels like distance. A quiet assumption that something essential was missing, that access was restricted, that power belonged elsewhere and had to be earned, granted, or unlocked. This assumption shaped your search, your effort, your patience. But there was never a gate. There was only orientation. You were never locked out of alignment. You were never excluded from coherence. You were never denied access to immediacy. What appeared as separation was simply attention turned away from itself. The door you thought you were approaching was always behind you. This realization is not dramatic. It does not arrive with triumph. It arrives with a strange softness, almost disappointment. The mind expects revelation to feel explosive. Instead, It feels obvious. Of course, there was nothing to unlock. Of course, there was nothing to achieve. Of course, the search itself was the veil. The identity resists this recognition because it undermines effort-based worth. If you were never locked out, then struggle loses its justification. Waiting loses its nobility. Becoming loses its urgency. This can feel destabilizing, but what dissolves is not meaning. It is delay. You stop asking how to enter. You stop preparing to arrive. You stop proving readiness. You simply stand where you are, and from here, everything functions differently. The moment you stop believing you are outside, the system recalibrates. Action feels lighter. Timing sharpens. Response becomes immediate without effort. Not because something was activated, but because nothing is being resisted. The universe does not welcome you in. It was never excluding you. You were participating the entire time, just from a position of negotiation instead of presence. This is why nothing external changes at first. The world looks the same. The people are the same. The circumstances are familiar. But your relationship to them is different. You no longer wait for permission to move. You no longer ask reality to confirm your worth. You no longer assume delay means denial. You respond. You adjust. You trust feedback without dramatizing it. This is the return, not to innocence as naivety, but to innocence as alignment. The innocence that does not assume guilt, lack, or disqualification. The innocence that does not need to earn the right to exist fully. This innocence is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not claim superiority. It does not seek recognition. It simply lives from coherence. The mind may still search occasionally. Old habits surface, questions arise, but they no longer carry urgency. Curiosity replaces desperation. Interest replaces need. You are no longer trying to escape where you are. This is why the journey ends not with fireworks, but with rest. Rest not as collapse, but as arrival without movement. You realize that every technique, every practice, every insight was not taking you somewhere new. It was loosening the grip of the belief that you were elsewhere. Nothing was missing, nothing was withheld, nothing was waiting to be unlocked. The power you sought was not hidden, it was overshadowed by effort. Now that effort has relaxed, what remains is simple participation. You act when action is needed. You pause when pausing is appropriate. You speak when clarity moves you. You are silent when silence is sufficient. Life becomes less about control and more about response. This does not make you passive. It makes you precise. Precision does not require force. It requires presence. And presence was never unavailable. The final chapter is not a conclusion. It is a recognition that there is nothing left to conclude. No final step, no last barrier, no ultimate arrival. Just this, you hear, reality responding. No distance between them. You were never locked out. You were always inside, dreaming of entry, until the dream released itself. And now, without effort, without announcement, without delay, you live,